KindnessCan, the podcast, with radio personality Jane Lindley Thomas and psychologist Paul Bushell. Because every act of kindness, no matter how big or small, can change lives. In this series, Jane and Paul hope to enrich your life by giving you practical tools on how to be kinder in your relationships with yourself, with those around you, at home, work, and in your community.
Welcome to another episode of the KindnessCan podcast. Today we have a very special friend of ours, a psychologist and smash hit author of the parenting book Bounce, the one and only Naomi Holdt. Hello, my friend.
Oh, hello. It is so exciting to be with two of my favorite human beings in the world. The energy in this place is already just woohoo, sunshine and everything good.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
it's so lovely to see your face.
Yeah, so let's get straight into it. You released your first book last year, Bounce, and it's just, I was just saying to Naomi now, it is just so incredible. Non-judgmental, practical, safe and affirming. Well done. Tell us about Bounce.
Thank you. Sure. Yeah, Bounce has been a journey of many years in the making. I think I started putting all my thoughts together on this about a decade ago and then started putting them onto paper about a year ago. So it's been, and it's just on a subject that I think is so important in the world that we're living in at the moment, because our kids are really being knocked hard. So the aim of Bounce is to equip parents. I think so often we think, what kind of programs do we implement? What do we do what do we teach our kids? And actually, it's about the things that we can do, which is meant to be empowering, not, oh my word, it's all on me. How awesome that we can do so much.
What I love is, how people always say that parenting doesn't come with a handbook. Now it does.
Oh, that's like the best review ever.
No, for sure. So let's talk about resilience. What is resilience?
So I always like to put a visual to it and think about Tigger. We all love Pooh Bear, well, most of us, I think. Just that ability to bounce back. He's always boinging all over the place, or like an elastic band. So life is going to hit or throw lemons. So it's the difference between being able to get back up and get back into action and keep going, or staying down on the ground. And we see both happening. But what we as parents all want for our kids, we know that they're going to get knocked down. We all have. But the difference with a resilient child is they can get back up again.
Well, it's one of my favorite parts of the book, and there are so many favorite parts where you talk about that. The fact that the point of parenting, or one of the aims of parenting, is not to shelter your kids from life, but to equip them that when life does throw them lemons, that they have the tools to be able to do that. And I think, we talk about tools all the time, and I hope we can get really practical in this conversation today. So maybe you want to start off by, introducing, how do we start that as a parent? If we're wanting to kind of instill resilience in our kids, where do we begin?
Sure. And in the book, as you guys know, there's 20 attributes. So let's see how many of those practical tools we can kind of get in here. But you say, where do we begin? And I think the thing that we often make the mistake of in parenting is we believe that parenting begins with our kids. The hardest part about parenting is actually parenting begins with us and the work we do in ourselves. And when it comes to, just like every other part of parenting, when it comes to raising resilient kids, we have to look at our own resilience. And that means a lot of deep digging. And the analogy I heard someone use this last week was actually, it's going into that cave and it's lifting up those rocks that sometimes we don't want to. And I talk about the parenting mirror, looking in that parenting mirror and seeing what is going on within me that is reflecting on my kids. And that makes all the difference. So the question, often parents will come into my therapy room and say, Naomi, I want a self-confident child. You got to work on their anger. You got to work on this, that, the next thing. My question is always, how is that within you? That's where we got to start.
Yeah, look, it's only February and they look like there are a lot of shell-shocked parents kind of crawling around at the moment. And it's a lot of responsibility being the role model all the time, isn't it? But, Paul and I, and the work that we do in KindnessCan, always remind ourselves that even when we fall down, those are such beautiful lessons to show our children that we, too, are human. Because I think any parent that's trying to navigate this by trying to do it the right way There's no such thing, right?
No, there's not. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because that is a huge, huge part of building resilience in our kids, is showing them how we get up when we've been knocked down again. And a big part of that is owning our humanness.
Yeah.
I think if we look at resilience, and I actually get goosebumps talking about this, because it's just become so much more apparent how important this particular aspect is. We've got to show our kids that we stuff up too. We got to own those stuff ups, both the ones we make with other people and with them. Because when children grow up in homes, and too many kids do, where adults don't want to show their imperfections, kids kind of grow up believing, well, that means that I can't show my imperfections and my humanness. But making mistakes and failing is not only the best part of growing, it's a part of who we are. And when my kids stuff up in life one day, I don't want them to seek help out there and feel so isolated and alone because there's no one there for them. I want them to come to me because they know, wow, Mom stuffed up so many times. In this home, we make mistakes. Because otherwise what happens is when they make mistakes in their adult life, they're cloaked with shame. And if you look at the research, like just on shame as an emotion, it is something that excludes, it divides us from everyone else. It keeps us silent, and therefore you often see the spiral of depression. It keeps me feeling so alone. But as human beings, we are wired for togetherness and for belonging. And the opposite of shame is belonging.
Yeah.
It gets me so excited.
So you're starting to tap into words that come up a lot in your book, which is connection and belonging. And I just love that, how important it is for parents to create an environment of unconditional love.
Totally. And I think that word, how many of us go, yeah, unconditional love. But if we really think about what that means, how often when our kids say something, do something, come to us, it could even just be like a non-verbal or shoulder shrug, or we show our disappointment or disapproval. But that is communicating that how you do or who you are my love is conditional based on that. So we got to be so aware of that. Like, do we show our kids how much we love them, no matter how they're being, how feral they're being, how they're doing things? So that word, we really got to kind of unpack that word for ourselves.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that, because that was what I was going to say. We talk about the shame of a child. Okay, we don't want our child to be cloaked in shame. But how many parents at the end of a day get into bed feeling either guilty or shameful for the way they behaved? So for me, what's been really helpful practically, I'll give you an example. I had a really proud parenting moment a few mornings ago. So I broke my toe at the beginning of the year, and I was ratty in the morning, and I was getting the kids in the car, and I had to drive, and shame, my sweet dear husband was talking to me outside the window, and I snapped at him, and I was very, very, very kind. And we drove off, and I could feel that shame coming of like, oh my gosh, that was so not cool. So what did I do? I needed to turn it around. So I phoned him on the Bluetooth, and it started to ring, and they're like, why, who are you phoning? I said, I've got to phone Dad. And he answered the phone. Look at me, I get goosebumps. And I said, hello, my love. And he said, is everything okay? Have you left something at home? I said, I'm so sorry for the way I spoke to you. And in that moment, I could feel that whole car going, because it's okay.
Yeah.
You know, one swallow doesn't make up a summer. But in that moment, I gave them access to seeing that I dropped the ball.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that I'm a terrible mother. It means in that moment, I dropped the ball, and we can move through it. And before we knew it, everyone was choosing a song in the car, and off we went to school.
I love that, because you do, and that's what we got to do, and we've got to show our kids how to do that, and that's how we navigate when things like that happen. But in that moment, you showed them that there are going to be things in their lives that they do, that they regret, or that make them feel shameful, but that you can make it better. And that by talking about it to anyone that we trust in that safe space, that shame lifts, and you can go on to play your happy songs.
Yeah. So again, in the book, there's a beautiful list, which I love, gives me great soothing and solace of being a resilient parent, like how that can look. Because here we are talking about raising resilient kids, but as you said, we've got to go back. Like, how do I become more resilient in this relationship?
Yeah.
And it's a relationship, man, and it's ups and it's downs.
It is, but that's what I always, and for me, we talk about getting into bed at night and like feeling the guilt and whatever, but there's so much freedom in that human part of it, and that my kids understanding and our kids understanding we're just human beings. We don't have to be perfect. Our kids don't want perfect parents, because we know there's a reason. I always use this analogy, or there's a reason we're not married to robots. Like, we're married to other fallible human beings, because we connect in vulnerability. And how awesome for our kids to experience that. And parenting is, I think, a messy dance. Like, there are going to be days we are whirling around the kitchen, everyone's in sync, having a happy vibe, Joel. And then there are going to be other days where we're tripping over one another and we're getting irritated with one another. That's all okay. At the end of the day, you're just connected human beings who we want our kids, and this is the other big word for me, that's safety. I want my kids to feel safe enough to be able to be vulnerable. And on that safety, I think one of the most, I often just get a little smile to myself, but my kids will tune me. My daughter will say to me, Mom, put your phone down. It's family time. I love that she can do that without the fear of me tearing her head off. That for me means awesome. Yes, we're a family. We do this stuff together.
So, another big word that comes out in the book quite a lot is the value of boundaries. So what your daughter is so wonderfully doing here is calling you out on the boundaries that we have in our home based on our values. Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. How do we choose those boundaries? How do we maintain those boundaries? Because it's such a big part of feeling safe, right?
Absolutely. And boundaries are very, very important. We know that as part of, and I always use the analogy of, especially in South Africa, we totally get this. Like we have boundaries around our properties because if we didn't, we wouldn't feel safe. It's exactly the same in a parent-child. Any relationship actually needs boundaries. But instead of hard and fast rules, because rules are going to change, I don't think those are valuable. And that's just me and what works in my household. I like to go back to values because values will never, ever change. And in our house, the primary value is kindness. So is that kind? Was it kind? Was it necessary? Was it true? Because that's what, and if it wasn't, we talk about it. We talk about how to redo that other ways. And because it's a relationship, even things like, parents want to know, okay, if my child does this, what do I do about it? That actually takes me to a different, so in the relationship, we would talk about it. We would go back to boundaries. There's no need for this is what we do. Yeah, so in my relationship with my kids, I don't have you did this, so X is the consequence. Because if we look at a child's behavior, and this is where it's also important to understand, a child's behavior is either completely developmentally appropriate. You see, we as adults just sometimes, our expectations are totally off. Or they're reflecting our emotional space, parenting mirror back again. Or they are communicating an emotional message and there's a need. So when we reframe behavior like that, it's actually not necessary to look at behavior consequence.
We're talking about boundaries within the home, and that for me is something I can control, right? But now let's talk about those relationships that leave the house. So vulnerable share. One of my kids is having quite a hard time at school at the moment socially. It started at the end of last year. It was quite messy, and it unfortunately seems to be seeping back into that old programming again. And as a parent, when I first was kind of subjected to my child coming home and being really, really sad, I wanted to rip into people. That was my first, oh my gosh, here I go. I get goosebumps thinking about it because you never want to see a mother whose child is being messed with, right?
Totally with you on that. Tigress.
Yeah, so I first wanted to go for the school, then I wanted to go for the parent, then I wanted to go for the kid. Hello.
Totally normal. Totally normal.
But totally not cool, like a 44-year-old woman on the playground looking for somebody by the name of X. So then it was kind of like, I need to empower this child from the ground up from home. But it's hard thinking about that situation playing out at school and knowing that there are tips and tools of resilience that have been shared. But it's quite a scary feeling as a mom. And I think there's a lot of work to be done in the space of support because either if your child is a bully or being bullied, it leaves you feeling quite helpless.
Absolutely. And I think both bullied and bully, they're both victims. They're both disempowered. So it's really about looking bottom up. How do we empower our kids? And something like bullying, we have seen increase so much over the past few years. And I believe it's because society in general, especially our kids and teens, have been left feeling more and more disempowered for many reasons. But absolutely normal to be that crazy tigress mom, because when something like that happens, what we've also got to remember, when our kids go through stuff, it's like our own stuff on steroids.
100%.
We are triggered. Our unresolved process.
I got taken back to the bully at school when I was at school in 19 footsack. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And that's, again, we've got to work on our stuff because otherwise those lenses with which we see whatever our child's going through, it's actually not what they're going through necessarily, or it's contaminated because it's our stuff as well. So this parenting thing, it's all work.
So the first step would be dropping an anchor, right? Slowing the moment down, right? And you talk about that in the book as well, like really being mindful and conscious of what is happening in this moment, being the adult in the room, slowing it down and separating it out, I imagine. Separating what is my stuff, what is their stuff, what is an initial reaction, which is a normal feeling to have. I am the protector parent here, right? That's a very normal feeling to be angry and upset about this. But in slowing it down, I suppose we get to role model that that's a good thing for our kids to do when hard things happen. But it gives us access to thinking about what are my options, what are my choices here, and how do I turn this into something which is teachable and learnable for my kid, right? But also could have more beneficial outcomes. And I don't know what you think when I say something like, so many things on the parenting journey can sometimes be quite counterintuitive. Like they kind of go against an instinct almost. I don't know what you think when I say that.
No, absolutely. But I think we've also got to be compassionate with that tigress that comes out, because our first instinct as moms, as parents, is to dive right in there and protect our kids. So we've got to actually, yes, we might have to tame that part of it, but we also have to embrace it, because that's wired in us. Yeah. And I mean, any mother would do anything, and any parent would do anything to protect their kids. But I think
it's a reflection of something beautiful.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's what it's DNA. We are hardwired to do that. But I think for me, what is so beautiful, and it goes back to anything difficult that our kids are going to go through, we want to constantly make sure that the number one thing we're focusing on is the strength of the connection, because we want them to come to us. We want to always be their lighthouse, their safe place, so that no matter what goes down in life, whether it's bullying, whatever's happening at school, at varsity, in their adult lives, they will come home and know that we are that safe space. That is not going to, here we go, here's another thing, not going to try and fix, because most issues actually can't be fixed. And as human beings, we want understanding and safe places more than we want fixing. When we know that we are not alone, and if I have a parent who isn't going to try fix, who isn't going to judge, well, then I know I'm not alone, and I can actually, in that safe space, kind of find my own way. With something like bullying, yes, you want to give them tips and tools, and something that is not a way out, but that I talk to my kids often about. And it's helped them so much in terms of maybe just being slightly less impacted on, is understanding that, and we talk about this all the time, how people treat us it's a sign of their emotional space. It's not personal. And yes, it hurts like hell. But it's not personal. It's coming from a place of brokenness. And almost when we have that discussion, and I have a little drawing that I do, and we talk about something I call the shaggy dog syndrome. You know how when dogs come, the dogs will always go, they love their mud, their water, what have you. And then they come and stay. They don't go like over there under the tree and shake themselves off. No. They come and stand right next to you and they shake it off. And what happens? That stuff, all the mud, it like covers us. So it's the same as when someone has got their own stuff, they're going to want to get rid of it. And they're going to shake it. But it's up to us if we choose to absorb that and make it ours, or if we can understand where it comes from. And when we can understand it comes from that place of brokenness that had nothing to do with me, it kind of enables us to put a boundary up. And we help them strengthen that boundary. And a part of that is working on self-esteem, confidence. But through everything I speak about in the book, I mean, when we are parenting to raise resilient children, a part of that is raising confident kids, raising kids with strong self-esteem, who are going to get knocked down with incidences like you've described.
It's interesting, again, because the counterintuitive thing is I want to make a solution right here, right now.
Yeah.
I need to put a stop to this right here, right now, and that's not the way it is. And I mean, I was telling Paulie on the way in today, one of my other kids who had decided he wanted to go for a sleepover tonight, but then decided last night actually he wouldn't want to go for the night. He would want to go for the day. And could I fetch him in the afternoon? Ordinarily, of course, I would have said yes. But however, I'm fetching the twins 2 hours earlier in the same area and they're coming down Fields Hill. So I said, no, what other options are there? Usually, I would spring into, sure, this is what I'm doing and this is how we can. I was like, no, I can't. But what do you think? What are the options? And he was like, what time does Dad land from Joburg today? I said, I'm not sure. He said, should I phone him? Yeah, phone him. He dialed, he phoned, and I sat there. Hi, Dad. What time are you getting back from Joburg? 3 o'clock. Cool. Could you fetch me at about 7 o'clock from so-and-so's house? Sure, my boy. So there you go.
I love that.
Usually, I would spoon feed the process.
Yes.
Also, when you've got 3 kids or more than one child, it's so much easier to get it done. And I've had to learn that getting it done is easy for me, but is it easy for them? Because
Yeah.
I don't want to raise children that need me to be the cog in order to move.
And so important, because we want to know that when they get knocked down in those knocks in life, they have it in them to get back up again. And what you were doing there is you really were teaching problem-solving skills. And that's what they need when we're all stuck something. If there is a solution, well, it's no longer a problem. I can get my way out of here.
Yeah.
And again, so counterintuitive in many moments where it's just easier to do it for, or put your kid on your back and steamroll through life. Okay. You refer to steamrolling parents in the book as well, where sometimes, as hard as it is, you kind of got to let them be in a muddle and let them struggle a little and work their way through it. But that's sometimes hard. I can't remember if it was one of your posts, because I just absolutely love your posts. If you're not following Naomi on the socials, get there now, Naomi Holdt, psychologist. But it was a wonderful story about being conscious of your reactions when you see your children through the course of the day or the week. And it's quite tempting on the parenting journey, especially when it's busy and there's a lot going on, when you see your kids, to be like, have you done this? Or why haven't you done this? Have you brushed your teeth?
I'm so bad at that, guys.
Okay.
Oh, I'm so guilty of that. Oh.
Right? It's hard, I know, because you're just wanting to get through the day. And you've got 3 kids, right? There's a lot of things that need to happen in our day. But being conscious of every time my kids see me, the first thing they see, that look on my face of like, have you done something? As opposed to just every now and then being conscious of when they come around the corner, even though you know you've got to ask the question, have a smile on your face or say something affirming, right? And I'm not adding to all those millions of patters that you have to say to be a good parent, because in the moment, who can remember all these things to do? But I suppose just being conscious of my primary job here is to try to show love, and love is not always saying yes, and love is not always doing everything you want, but just trying to be conscious of that is my biggest job, right?
Absolutely. And I love that you brought that up, because too often we do feel as parents we're just issuing directives to survive our day from 6 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock at night, and then we like bug it. But in the process, we have missed out on so many opportunities for connection. You know, on that, something happened at yesterday, and it often happens in my home, and I have to keep them. And I think the older our kids get, even the more important. When our kids come to us and ask us to do something, no matter what we're busy with, if there is any way we can pause what we're doing and do it with them, to do that. Because I think especially our tweens and our teens, they're obviously becoming more and more independent. So when they ask for connection, heck, you drop what you're doing if you can. So I was busy doing emails yesterday afternoon. My son came to me and said, can you please play cricket with me? I was like,
Oh, I know that feeling.
yes, close the laptop.
Play cricket with you.
And but I went outside and he wanted to put on his playlist, and we jawed and we danced on the driveway and we played cricket. And I was like, this is what it is about. This is speaking to him that he matters to me, that I closed that laptop, that I made eye contact. And yes, through like this inner, still got to get back to these later. But I said yes, because as I said, as they get older, they're going to ask for those opportunities less and less, especially if they realize we're going to keep saying no, because there's always a more important chore that we have to be doing.
And as they get older, it doesn't become, even though they're asking less, it doesn't mean that it's less important for them, right? And as for teens, you've got to be quite conscious of that.
Totally, because we think teens actually that yes, their role is to become independent of us, but I almost think they need us more sometimes than our littlies, because the world is hard out there and they're having to navigate it on their own, figuring out who they are and going their own way. They need to know their safe space, even when they're pushing us away and giving us all the attitude in the world, that their safe space is still right there, isn't going to abandon them and think that they don't need us.
I have a laugh because last weekend it was so hot, and my beautiful Rejoice collection, my pre-loved fashion studio, flooded twice during the last rain, and I actually didn't have capacity, so I just shut the door. And we decided on Saturday we were going to deal with it. And my son came up in the morning and said, please, I need that electric screwdriver thing, because he wants to make a weapon. And we're like, yeah, we'll get to it. And then he came back in the afternoon and he said, you know, here I need the screwdriver. But here we are hauling with the moon boot on, like rails of clothing, and like we are up to our eyeballs with like just trying to get this done. And he came back a third time and he said, Dad, I need the drill. And Mikey said, yeah, I'll get to it. And he walked out and I said to Mikey, you got to do it now.
Yeah.
You got to do it now. And so he climbed off the ladder, okay, while stringing pieces of fabric on the rafters in the heat. And he went, I got to hear the and my son came around the corner with this broomstick that had a flamingo's head mounted on the side with like screws. He said, look what I've made with Dad. Look what I've made with Dad. And it took 15 minutes of us saying, okay, we are so focused on this. I get it. We've got to get this done before nightfall. But then the difference it made in that boy.
And in the relationship, and that's what he'll remember.
Yeah.
He's going to remember the time Dad came down from the rafters and spent the 15 minutes. That's what he will remember. And the thing is, what we need to, is if he hadn't, your boy would have gone to bed feeling like that mom's collection is more important than me.
Unseen.
And that's what we do, whether it's emails or messages or social media. That's the message they take. It's not what we mean. Heck no. We just listen, this has to be a priority. And sometimes other things do have to be a priority.
Yeah.
But we never want our kids to leave our presence or to go to bed that night feeling like something else is more important in mom and dad's life than me.
It's so hard not to feel so stretched, though. You know, in those moments where you have been stretched like a piece of press stick in a hot KZN climate. You know what I mean? Where you're just you're just being extrapolated to the bare bones. And then they ask that one question too many, like, can I? You just want to be like, listen here, bro. I'm at it too. You know what I mean? It's hard to keep a lid on things when you're always dancing. Dancing.
And you know what? Sometimes that lid is going to blow right off. But
I call it the going boom. I can feel it coming like a hot wave. I say, I'm going to go boom. I need space. I'm going to go boom. And that's really helped us, to be honest, because it happens very rarely that I go boom. But there are those moments where I get pushed to absolute breaking points. And I can feel it coming, and I'm like, I'm going to go boom, and everyone's just like, whoa, clear the decks. She's going to go boom.
And you know what? When you do go boom, because we all do at times as parents, then what is important and actually so amazing for relationships is that repair, is going to them and going, you know what, I stuffed up. I'm so sorry. And I talk about that in my book. My kids have never gone, that's it, Mom, stuff you. That's the last time. Yeah. They usually wrap their arms around me and go, it's okay, Mom. And my little daughter, she's often said, Mom, it's okay. You're just human. I'm like, whoa, at that point. But also the other thing that I talk about in the book is just regulating ourselves. And when I'm feeling like I'm going to go boom, and I've taught my kids this too, is just different breathing, ways to regulate through breathing. And I know I'm not saying anything about my driving, but sometimes when I'm driving, people drive in ways that get my lid bubbling, and I'll just clutch onto the steering wheel, and my kids will be absorbing all this and go, milkshake breathe, Mom, milkshake breathe. And then they breathe in, and then for different breaths in and out. But I describe that in the book. But it's just, and they pick it up, and guess what? They see Mom is putting a word to it. She's putting something into place. It's okay to feel frustrated, and when we feel frustrated, if at all possible, we can try and regulate ourselves by identifying that emotion and putting something into place to get those levels back down again.
What I love
Awesome, let's order in.
I can't help but feel that one of the lines in your book really stood out with me, this idea that we're living in a generation that's never been more overparented but less connected.
Yeah.
And how there's this temptation, and it's wonderful that there is so much stuff out there, but how sometimes all these different ideas and different ways of doing things can sometimes be quite overwhelming, and all the overwhelming thoughts lead to anxious feelings, which result in sometimes strange, unhelpful behaviors. But if I listen to this whole conversation, we kind of were to summarize it in some way, how just important being conscious of yourself and being open to growing and learning on your journey.
Every day,
and being okay with that and forgiving of that. But seeing yourself as your love and your connection as probably the greatest gift that you can give your kids. And that doesn't always have to be textbook perfect. It's just about finding those moments. And sometimes it's actually the imperfect moments where that really happens.
That's
right?
what I was going to say. I think we need to give up this idea of perfect parenting and oh my word, I stuffed up. Because actually, if I think of the deepest moments of connection with my kids, yes, it's the times we're laughing and having fun. It's also the times when we feel so safe in one another's presence that we're all melting down. And that's okay. It's often those messiest moments that are most deeply connecting. And I get goosebumps just saying that again.
Well, I'm just going to say thank you for the book because, you're just looking through it. There's so much soothing. So it kind of feels like that life raft that's sitting on the shelf that should you need it, it's there. There's everything from asking the question, what is resilience, anxiety and depression, building resilience in your children, boundaries and gentle parenting, as well as parenting the anxious child. I know that anxiety, it seems like every child to some degree is anxious about something. And obviously that differs in intensity. And again, for a parent that has an anxious child, it's so hard to not get caught in the crosshairs of wanting to solutionize this thing, if that's even a word. I need solution. But rather to say, here's my hand, take it. We do this together. They're going to be good days and bad days for me too.
Exactly.
That normalizing, I think, is also such a huge part of this journey. Is I never want to come across as pedestalized and looking like I know and have my things sorted out, because my God, not at all. Also, tips for divorced parents, childhood depression, and highly sensitive children, and resilience. So, I mean, you've really thrown a beautiful net over here, and I think there's a lot of soothing is the word that comes up time and time again for me. So, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. The word I was going to say was lighthouse, but yeah, the common theme here is you are a light in our community. So, thank you for being that light. And providing us with such a beautiful book. You can follow Naomi at Naomi Holdt, psychologist, and her book Bounce, How to Raise Resilient Kids and Teens, is available in all bookstores that know how cool it is. So go and get your copy. Naomi, thank you for spending time with us.
Oh man, like I said at the beginning, you two are honestly, it's just a breath of fresh air. I just love being with both of you. So thank you for the honor of today.
Lots of love.
Lots of love.
Love back.
You've been listening to Kindness Can, the podcast. Find out more at kindnesscan.co.za.